Find the courage to disappoint the people who expect you to stay small. I am going to tell you this as a friend and mentor. The moment you step into 100% authenticity and you start walking in that anointing and that calling and that path that you single-handedly chose for yourself, you're going to disappoint people, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're no longer the version of yourself that they were comfortable with. Okay, because when you start acting in a different way, you start having different habits for yourself, you start cultivating a different lifestyle, you start even speaking differently about yourself. You're no longer self-hating and you're actually speaking love to yourself. There are going to be people in your life that do not like it. When you no longer tolerate certain things in your life, there are going to be relationships that kind of bite back. Because when you no longer people please and you start serving yourself rather than overextending and overgiving to people that were taking from you, they're not going to like the fact that they no longer have access to your energy. Maybe it might be a false loyalty to a parent. Maybe there's a false loyalty to your mother of, oh, I'm not going to succeed past this point because then she's going to get uncomfortable. Maybe it's with a certain relationship, a romantic partner. And if you succeed past a certain point, they're like, oh, you need to humble yourself. Stop trying so hard. Maybe it's with a friendship. Maybe you have certain friends that show up, but they're kind of more just becoming a watcher and they'd rather keep that access to you rather than actually support you. There was something, my mentor back in the day, they told me every single time you have like a major milestone in your life that like you hit, you need to do a spiritual hygiene kind of evaluation with the relationships in your life. And you need to evaluate what type of people are in your life and how they react to you continuing to grow and expand. Because some people only want to keep you in this certain aspect and perspective that they have of you. Some people only like the small little vessel that they have placed you in, and they don't want you expanding past that limit. So you then need to have the courage to disappoint those people and realize just because we have history does not mean we have a future. Okay, if you only want to stay in this little bubble of like a fishbowl, guess what? I want to go swim in the ocean. So you're going to have to get comfortable with me outgrowing that aspect of being small. Because the version of you that has what you want is going to be larger than the version of you that you currently are. Because as you continue to expand your vessel further and further, and you continue to regulate your nervous system to be able to hold and receive more from life, there are going to be people that haven't done that shadow work themselves that are going to kind of get jealous. And so there might be certain friendships in your life that they kind of show up, and they're talking to you and they're like, oh, hey, give me a life update. But they might not actually be a good supportive friend. So you need to have an evaluation of, hey, is this a friend that actually supports me? Or do they kind of make backhanded compliments? Do they kind of, oh, that's nice, and they kind of just brush off your achievements? Are they somebody that kind of gets uncomfortable and you can sense that energy shift with them when you start talking about your dreams of becoming bigger and bigger? And then you need to ask yourself, is that just somebody that wants access to my life? Or are they actually somebody that I want in my life? And are they somebody that are showing up and supporting me the way that I'm supporting them? Because I know personally, anytime my friends succeed, I'm like writing them cards, I'm sending them flowers, I'm like supporting them online. I'm doing what I can to celebrate them because I want to celebrate them and I want them to celebrate me when I achieve just as well. And in the past, I had friends that I thought were supportive of me, but when I actually started succeeding, they went radio silent. And I realized it's because they wanted me to stay small in the areas that they were comfortable in because they didn't want to do the hard work themselves and take the risks. So I did. I had to slowly separate myself from them because I realized you are the people you hang around, and I don't want to hang around small-minded people because I myself never want to stay small. And now the friendships that I have, they are supportive and they're not competitive. They're celebrators because they themselves are in an aspect of abundance and not scarcity. But it was hard. It was hard breaking those false loyalty contracts that I had to certain friendships and certain family members when I started succeeding. Because especially when you grow up in, let's say, like low income housing and you grow up kind of on that side of the tracks, you know what it's like to have nothing. You know what it's like to be paycheck to paycheck. You know what it's like to freak out about buying a toothbrush because, you're tight on that money. And so when you finally start getting yourself to a place where you're no longer stressed about bills, there's almost this guilt complex, especially when then people do make comments, oh, you think you're better than us now? And I remember the first time And I remember the first time I was able to afford a designer piece of shoes that I had worked really hard towards. There was this kind of guilt of knowing that like people that I went to school with and like certain family members were still like tight on bills. And I had this false sense of loyalty that I had to be okay, comfortable disappointing them and moving on and continuing on because I did not want to stay in those circumstances for the rest of my life. And I also had to let go of carrying and holding emotional space for things that wasn't mine to hold and realize that we're all adults and they are where they are because they chose not to do the work. And I am where I am because I have chosen to do the shadow work. I have chosen to put my time and energy into things that I want, not things that I don't want. I don't complain about the things that I don't want anymore. I don't sit around the things and just play victim. Because I know that I am 100% accountable for my life. And when I take 100% accountability, I have 100% of the power in my hands to then cultivate and create the life that I want. Because there is a version of you that people have learned. There is that past version of you that people learned that was easier to control, easier to understand, and easier to keep in a box. Maybe you were agreeable. Maybe you were a people pleaser. Maybe you always said yes to people and you were just easier to control. So then when you start showing up as a new version that no longer just overextends and overgives, especially as a woman in our society that has been taught of, oh, she has to give to everyone and basically just overextend, overgive, take care and mother all these people. No, that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is for your emotions, your actions, and your life. Okay? You should not have to give yourself to the point you are hemorrhaging so much energy and you're basically on life support trying to overextend and overgive to all these people. They're not your responsibility. So now as a new version, when you start putting those boundaries down, there's going to be energy vampires that react to that and say, whoa, 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 you always say yes to watching my kids for free. You always say yes to doing this. Like, why aren't you able to do this? And you're going to have to say and understand that no is a complete sentence and that those people are going to be uncomfortable and you're going to probably feel some uncomfortableness having that new boundary as a new version of yourself and realize that they might not react positively to those boundaries and you have to be okay with that. And that's where I say, I hope you have the courage to disappoint the people who expect you to stay small. Because the moment you start speaking differently, you start acting differently, you start carrying yourself differently, the moment you start showing up in a new aspect and you create this new state of being of a personal reality, you break the contract they had with the old you because you're a new creation. When you start thinking new thoughts and start feeling new things, you start creating a new state of being in yourself because you're acting and registering and vibrating at a different frequency that the old contract, the dead is gone. As the Bible says, the dead is gone and the new has come. You are a new creation in Christ, this anointing inside of you, that's your hope of glory. So that old contract no longer exists and these people, they're going to show up and they're going to try to tell you who you were. Whoa, 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 that's not who you are. Who do you think you are? Like, you're not rich, you're not this. They're going to try to shit down on you because they're uncomfortable with the new version of you. And you're going to have to say, I'm sorry. No, that's not who I am anymore. I don't drink and party anymore. I don't do this anymore. Like I show up, you know, when you have and you set boundaries of, let's say, like even eating healthier, they're going to try to overstep boundaries. Like, oh, just have a slice of cake. You can have it. Like, it's no big deal. Like, oh, you're not fun anymore. And they're going to try to put you back into the box, into the contract that they had with you that gave them access to you in the way that they wanted. And you're going to have to be like, no. That's not who I am. I don't want that. And if they continually disrespect you and try to put you back in that and they continually step over those boundaries, you're going to have to address that. And it's going to be uncomfortable. And that's where I say, I hope you have the courage to disappoint those people and to break those contracts of false loyalties outside of yourself where you have overextended and overgiven parts of you in approval and seeking validation before you learn that all the love and all the acceptance and all the worth that you wanted was already inside of you. And here's the part that not a lot of people tell you at first is it does not always feel empowering at first when you outgrow people. It almost feels like you're doing something wrong because you're like, whoa, this is different because it's a new you. You have a new program on board, so you're operating as a new person, you're acting as a new person, and so you kind of almost feel, like I said, that false guiltiness because you've put loyalties and contracts with people where you've made that energy exchange and you're like, well, I don't want to be that person anymore, but they keep trying to pull me back into that. And so it doesn't necessarily always feel empowering outgrowing them at first. It almost feels like you're doing something wrong because they don't always react positively. Because an unhealthy person does not want to see that healthiest version of you because that's going to confront the mirror in them of like, oh, I could be making changes. Because you have to understand every relationship you have outside of yourself is just mirroring and reflecting parts of you, whether it's conscious parts of you or it's unconscious parts of you. So when you are an unhealthy person, you're also going to attract unhealthy people. Like, I know when I was an over-giving people pleaser back in the day, I attracted a lot of toxic narcissistic relationships because that was the dynamic I had growing up in my household. So of course I attracted friendships like that because that's what I was familiar with. That's what I was used to. So then when I started healing and I started taking accountability and taking and doing that inner work, now I've met resistance with people. And some of those friendships, they also grew with me. And over time, we had that resistance, but with that iron sharpening iron, now we have healthy friendship. But other people, they didn't like it. And I had to have the courage to disappoint them and say, well, that's not who I am anymore. Like, I'm not going to do that. Like, no, you're not going to talk to me like that. I deserve basic human respect. And I had to let those friendships go. And there was nothing wrong with that, but it did not feel empowering. It felt very sad. It felt grievous, especially if you are trauma bonded to people. That's a lot harder to, I would say, sometimes release yourself from those kind of grips and holds of the energy strings, rather than just a normal, healthy relationship that you're like, yeah, we were coworkers, we had a good time, but I'm moving on, XYZ. And sometimes it feels like guilt, like you're doing something wrong, like you're betraying them, but you're not. You're just no longer betraying yourself. Because staying small to keep people comfortable is a slow form of self-abandonment. When you are not authentically yourself and you hold back whatever aspect it is to approve and please these people, you're self-abandoning. And self-abandonment is not love, okay? It's not. It's conditional performance. It's performance to try to gain love and approval, which we don't do here. And I have a video about earning love. You don't need to earn it. That is purely the ego trying to stay in control of you. And it's choosing approval over truth, fitting in over becoming, and comfort over calling. And you were not created to live like that. And ironically enough, that a lot of times, like I noticed with myself, is when I was so afraid of rejection, like stepping in that authentic self, that fear had me just rejecting myself before even risking being rejected by other people out of people pleasing. But also in that same paradox, by me not wanting to step out and be authentic in myself out of fear of rejection, I was also holding myself back from finding the people that liked the most authentic parts of me. Because when you perform and you people please, you're not loving yourself and you're not living authentically to yourself. So you're conforming and you're consuming external validation rather than creating love and validation within yourself and then attracting people with that beauty and that outflow. So you're looking for everything out here rather than tending to the garden inside of you and learning to fully love and embody that version, and realizing when you accept yourself and you no longer disappoint yourself, it doesn't matter then when you disappoint other people. But there is this transition state when you're so used to people pleasing and you're so used to performing for everyone else and seeking their approval that you need to have the courage to then disappoint them. And you need to realize, guess what? That's not your life support. Life comes from you, not at you. And so now when you no longer disappoint yourself and you stand in 100% authenticity in yourself, you're raw and you're authentic, and you learn to love you. And the more you love you, the less you care about anybody else if they love you or not, because you're content with who you are. You like who you are. You feel good about yourself. You know who you are because you keep promises to yourself, and you no longer self-abandon in performance of other people. So even then, when you do disappoint other people, you don't take it personally anymore because you no longer have loyalties and contracts outside of yourself trying to find love and approval. And I know for me, it was a transition. The first time I stood up for myself, it felt like I was literally emotionally dying inside. I was like, the whole world is ending. Everybody's going to hate me. Nobody's going to want to be my friend because I actually have a boundary now. And that's just the ego trying to stay in control and trying to keep you trapped and small, because it tells you all these stories of like, oh, this is going to happen, these worst case scenarios. But let me tell you something. If you can think of a worst case scenario, you can also say, no, I'm sorry, we're not going to think that. And you can direct your thoughts, take every thought captive to Christ, and you can think of a best case scenario. And I said, yeah, but what if this actually opens the door to something new? Like a lot of times I think the ego, it likes to get us in this spiral of like, oh, you just lost all these friendships. What if actually you just resolve your contracts with those people? And what if by you now putting down that boundary and no longer willing to stay in that box of being small, you've just expanded and outgrown that contract, and you've actually done everything right by now acting healthy and full authenticity into who you are? And now that contract has been resolved with that person, and now you let it go. You lost it, you let it go, and now your hands are open for a healthier, better version of a friendship that you would rather want. Somebody that actually shows up and supports you. And so a lot of times we let the ego look at things as loss, of like, oh, you lost that friendship, you lost that relationship. What if you've just done everything right and you've just resolved it? And that friendship now is like an old pair of middle school basketball shorts that just no longer fit you. You're in high school now. You need high school sized clothing, not middle school. So instead of trying to stay small, I need to keep fitting into these middle school basketball shorts. No, let them go. Say, I love you basketball shorts, but you're no longer fitting me. I need new shorts that fit this season of my life. Just like in playing Mario, okay? Like, I love playing Mario on the Switch. You need different power-ups for different seasons. You need to learn and continue to grow. If you just stay in level 1 your entire life, you're not going to grow and expand. And now there's going to be people that want to keep you in level 1. Hey, just stay with us, because by you going to level 2, you have shown them that it's possible. And you've also shown them and brought to light, by being the brightest version of yourself, the light casts out the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome. By you being authentic in yourself, you put a light. You're like a city on a hilltop, and you shine a light into them. And people don't always like that. They don't like to admit, you know what, I am where I am because I didn't do the hard work. And so by you, especially if you grew up in low-income housing and poverty and you got yourself to a successful state, you've shown them that it's possible. And they can't use excuses anymore around you. And so then instead of taking accountability, they want to keep being the victim. And so they're going to attack you on it. And so you have to get comfortable saying, I'm sorry, I'm going to disappoint you because I don't want to disappoint the future version of myself, and I don't want to disappoint the younger version of myself, and I want to prove to myself that it is possible to create the life that I love. You were never created to live in conformity to somebody else's idea of you. Art is not digestible to everyone, okay? You are art, and art was never meant to be predictable, digestible, or confined. You were meant to color outside of the box. You are meant to create in every aspect that you want, and you are meant to disappoint people, okay? If artists created what people wanted them to create rather than creating what they wanted to create, they would not become the ginormous, beautiful masterpieces that we see in museums today. And I think there's a lot of people in our culture that are just creating what they think people want to see. And the world does not need more creations of what they think they want to see. The world needs authentic people creating authentic art and creating something new. Okay, we need to stop seeing Etsy knockoff after Etsy knockoff after Etsy knockoff of I'm going to act like this and I'm going to dress like this and I'm going to perform like this. No, we need people who are saying, you know what, this is an original piece of art and I don't need to create what I think other people want to create anymore, because I'm okay disappointing people, because I know by disappointing people, I'm actually just sifting through the sand and getting past the goats to find the sheep that are like me. But if you stay, okay, if you stay like a fish trying in a circle of sheep to perform for everyone, like, yeah, I'm a sheep, you're not going to fit in, because you're not meant to be around sheep. If you're a fish, you're meant to find other fish. So you need to stop performing for people, and you need to get okay disappointing people of, you know what, I don't actually like living in the country. I'm not a sheep, okay? I like living by the coast. I'm a fish. And you need to go live and create that life that you want to create. And it's okay, because you're not going to be digestible for everyone, because not everyone likes every piece of art. The Mona Lisa, okay, that is a well-known piece of art. And there you could be the Mona fucking Lisa, and there will still be somebody that says, meh, I don't understand the hype about you. And that's okay. It is completely okay to not be everyone's cup of tea, because there are people that think the Mona Lisa is like one of the best pieces of art ever made. And you will find those people a lot quicker by actually being the version of the art that is 100% most true to yourself. Some people only love the version of you that doesn't challenge them, the version that doesn't grow, the version that doesn't rise, the version that doesn't reflect back to them what they're unwilling to become. And when you start expanding, you become a mirror to them. You become a mirror, and not everyone is ready to look at themselves in the mirror. So they'll call you too much. They'll call you different. They'll call you wrong. But what they really mean is you've changed the dynamic, and I don't know how to meet you here. And I'm unwilling to take accountability for myself, so I'm gonna blame, attack, and try to dismantle your courage because I don't like this new version of you. That is what they really mean. So when somebody does attack you or they try to put you back in a version of yourself that you no longer are, just love them. Genuinely just love them. And I know it's gonna hurt. It's going to be hard. And there, especially if you're in or you were in a narcissistic dynamic, whether it was with a parent, a friendship, or a romantic relationship, there will be, I would say, this season of you, if you're questioning, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, I'm just showing up as the best version of myself. I'm loving you the best I can, and you're attacking me. It's because you are becoming a light, and they are jealous of that authentic light and that courage that you have to be yourself, because they don't want to do the hard work themselves and look into that mirror and love every aspect of themselves. So it's easier just to self-hate you rather than actually take accountability for their actions. And so they will gaslight you, and they will just try to lie to you and project all of their hurt and pain onto you as if that's who you are, to make themselves feel better and to try to get that power back into themselves, because they no longer can attach onto your energy because you put that energetic boundary of, I'm not going to give you that anymore. I'm not going to self-abandon myself for you anymore. And it will feel at first, like I said, it's not always going to feel empowering. In fact, it's going to feel like you're grieving the loss of a relationship, like you're almost guilty because of how they're reacting. And you have to learn you're not responsible for them. You are not emotionally responsible for them. So you have to learn to willingly and lovingly let that go. Of like, okay, I'm sorry, but that's not who I am anymore. You know, and they're like, well, I like this version better of you. That's okay. That's okay. But I like this version better of me more. Well, this, that, the other, like, that's not who you are. Like, that's not how, like, you're not honoring and respecting me. Like, you need to honor and respect your parents. I'm sorry. Respect is earned, not just given. I don't do this whole toxic Christian dynamic of we just need to endure abuse, okay? Because unconditional love does not tolerate abuse. Unconditional love says, yes, we all make mistakes. And when you come to me and you take accountability and you change and grow, then I'm willing to change and grow with you. I'm willing to forgive. I'm willing to have grace, because we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all have days that we don't show up 110, and that we're just fried and frustrated when we do react, because we're souls expanding and growing in consciousness. But what love does not do is continually self-abandon to appease and gain your approval. That's not love, because love protects. So love ultimately protects myself. Love gives, love endures. So I'm going to endure and give towards myself. And from the love that I give to myself, then I will love you. But I'm not going to self-abandon and put myself on life support to give you everything I have, because you don't want to give yourself love. You don't want to do the hard work for yourself. Okay, this is a two-way street. This is not just me all giving and you just taking. So love has to learn healthy boundaries for themselves, and you're going to have to learn healthy boundaries. You're going to have to learn to disappoint people. You're going to have to learn to have people be uncomfortable with you. You're going to have to learn how to have hard conversations. I remember a couple weeks ago, there was a certain family member that they like reached out to me, and they kind of do this thing. They're very old school, where they always, kind of compare you to somebody else when they're congratulating you. It's kind of that backhanded compliment of like, oh yeah, you're so much like this person. And I've had to learn, and I just had to say thank you for your kind words, but I would appreciate not being compared to these other people with my personal achievement. Like, this is my work. They haven't done the work, okay? Like, I understand we might have similar traits, but I am a whole, complete person in myself, and I don't feel like having my achievements compared to somebody else. And I had to have that conversation with them, and it was really uncomfortable for me as somebody who is a recovering people pleaser from past things, but it was needed. And self-love, who no longer abandons, doesn't brush things under the rug. If something seriously hurts you, that's something to actually take an accountability of like, okay, why did this hurt me? Was it from them? Was it from this? And you need to just have that evaluation and understand, if it was them, then it is not wrong to say, hey, I'm not going to be talked to like that. I'm not going to be treated like that. But it's not okay for you to continually self-abandon out of a fear of disappointing somebody or upsetting them, and you're walking on eggshells in your own life. So you're going to have to learn to let people be uncomfortable. You're going to have to learn to disappoint people. You're going to have to learn to feel that gaze of disapproval from people that you have used to seek external approval from so many years. When you live your life seeking approval, external validation and external approval from others, you're going to have to get uncomfortable and sit in that the first time when you feel that disapproval from them. When you no longer seek their approval and you no longer seek that love and acceptance externally, and you're going to have to feel that gaze. You're going to have to feel that burn and realize it's not the end of the world. It's just your nervous system experiencing a new reality. And that's when you no longer self-abandon and you sit there with that. You say, hey, I love you though. I approve of your decision. I know that this job aspect is going to make us a lot happier than doing what our parents wanted us to do. So I'm going to pursue this route. And I'm okay if they disapprove because I'm not disapproving of myself anymore. And I love myself. I'm not going to abandon myself anymore. And you need to sit in that. And it's okay to have that feeling. And I think sometimes we try to avoid ever feeling uncomfortable in our lives. And we need to understand that feeling uncomfortable is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that you're experiencing something new and different that you're not used to. When you start running farther than you've ever ran, or you start lifting heavier weights or doing and going to the gym if you've never gone, it's going to feel uncomfortable. I remember when I started training and running farther and farther and farther for soccer back in the day. I remember hitting mile 6 after I hadn't ran for a very long time, feeling like my lungs were about to combust inside of me, and it felt so uncomfortable. But did I quit? No, I kept going. So the same emotionally when you have to have those confrontations and conversations with people. And you're going to have the courage to disappoint the people who expect you to stay small, because it's not a bad thing. You growing, not a bad thing. You expanding the muscles on your lungs running, not a bad thing. You expanding your muscles at the gym, not a bad thing. You going up higher levels in Mario, not a bad thing. That's a good thing. You should be growing because nothing ever stays stagnant. Energy is always moving, always changing. That is one of the laws of the universe. So if you're not growing and expanding, then you're slowly shrinking and dying. And so the more you shrink yourself, the more you're self-abandoning yourself and you're making yourself small. Why would you do that? You are supposed to take up as much space as you can humanly possible. Expand your energy field, expand your life, dream bigger and bigger and bigger every single day, and challenge yourself to dream bigger. And when you hit a dream block of like, oh, I don't know if that's possible, why? Who are you believing? What lies, what voices in your head are you believing? What false loyalty to those voices do you have in your head that your ego is feeding you stories about, trying to keep you small? Because I think there's some of you that might be watching this, that it's not even physical people anymore that you're afraid of disappointing, and you're trying to stay small for. It's just their voices. I remember I had a certain parent that it's their voice. That I had to learn to break that loyalty contract with their voice in my head. Because any single time I would expand past it, I would hear that voice just in my head telling me old things from my childhood. Even though I wasn't in contact with them anymore, I still had that fear of disappointing that voice inside my head that the ego was using to try to control me. And when I broke past that boundary, then it was a different person's voice. And the ego will just continue to use whatever person's voice that you have the most seeking still approval of in your life in that season. And so you have to usually confront the ego. Sometimes you're not even fearing of disappointing external physical people. It's just the ego's voice. It's just the ego saying, well, that's not who you are. Who do you think you are? And it's just going to use those voices and lies because it's trying to steal, kill, and destroy your future. And you're going to say, no, I don't tolerate that. No, that's not who I am. I'm sorry. That's okay. I can disappoint that voice because I'm happy now. And you're going to have to get uncomfortable disappointing the voice in your head, because usually the battle you're facing is all just up here. And once you resolve what's going on up here and you've created a state of heaven and you make it a nice garden, everything out here resolves itself as well. Ultimately, your responsibility is not to be who they expect you to be. It's to become who you were fully created to be. So continue to grow, continue to expand, and continue to have the courage to disappoint the people who expect you to stay small. Because the life that you were meant to live exists on the other side of that courage.